Welcome to Humble Beginnings, the Undrafted podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Hamilton Jr., and this is episode 31 of the podcast. We hit a milestone last week when we hit the 30th episode of the Undrafted podcast, in which it was a blessing. And I have to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for blessing me to even get this far, to bless me with the gifts, the talents, and the resources to do this. Because I did not see this thing going, I didn't even see this thing making it 30 episodes. So that in and of itself was amazing. We got a nice show for you today. Talking on the podcast today, we'll be talking about, the Broncos. They had the bye week this week, so they didn't play, but they do have a very important game coming up on Sunday. The Ravens and John Harbaugh, man, that's been a crazy development over there in Baltimore. It's not all that surprising, but, well, it's surprising, but it's not surprising. What's going on in Baltimore with them and John Harbaugh. The Raiders, man, whew, they are struggling bad. Talk a little bit about them and some of the things that's going on over there in O-Town in 2018. Then my hometown, Amarillo, man, we got a pro baseball team. Pro baseball is back in Amarillo, man. And while I'm excited about having a professional baseball team back in my hometown, that name, I got to get used to that name. We'll talk about that. Dez Bryant, he tore his ACL last Friday against the Saints, unfortunately. We'll have a discussion about that. Larry Fitzgerald hit a career milestone over in Arizona, so big ups to him. And then the drama over there in Golden State. Me personally, I actually think the drama in Golden State more or less a good thing, because Golden State's a boring squad. I'm sorry, they're just the most boring story in the NBA. They really are. So the drama that's going on over there just adds a little bit of spice to it. So I'll talk about that coming up as well. We got a lot to talk about on the podcast today. So without further ado, let's jump into the Low with Ro. According to Jason Lockenfora of CBS Sports, the Baltimore Ravens and John Harbaugh appear to be headed to a mutual parting of ways at the close of the season, but he's not in any danger of an in-season firing. Now, for me personally, this move makes a lot of sense on a few fronts. And for the Broncos' sake, I sincerely hope this happens. And I sincerely hope all the dominoes fall in the right places, because I would love to see this dude on Denver's sideline next season. Yes, the Ravens have been average the last few seasons, and if they miss the playoffs this season, this will be the third consecutive year come playoff time that they're on the outside looking in. They're 44-45 since winning the Super Bowl back in 2012. Now you fast forward to this year, 2018, and their defense looks really, really nice. They're the number 2 defense in the league, and it's the offense now that's sputtering over in Baltimore. Eric DeCosta's taking over as the general manager when Ozzie Newsome retires after the season, and like most GMs, he wants to start off with his guy. So this move makes sense from a few angles. The Ravens' last few drafts haven't been all that productive. Joe Flacco, he's flamed out ever since he exploded during that Super Bowl run. And I'm still mad at Joe Flacco about that game against the Broncos when they beat Denver in Denver. And one of the biggest plays in that game was when he hit Jacoby Jones on that 70-yard-plus Hail Mary pass. That was a bunch of bull jive, because I'm still upset with Raheem Moore for even taking that bad angle to not be able to knock the ball out of play. But, it is what it is. The past is the past. You can't cry over spilled milk, but I'm still hot. Now, if and when this happens, John Harbaugh will be one of the hottest, if not the hottest, candidate in NCAA and NFL circles. Now, with that, the only way the Ravens can keep him is with a long-term commitment and with a last-minute change of mind at the GM position. Now, there's a better chance of Jesus returning before 2018 is over than that happening. Overall, John Harbaugh is 98-71 in 11 NFL seasons, 10-5 in the postseason, has a .580 winning percentage, including 5 straight trips to the playoffs to begin his start with the Ravens. Now, he's one of the few coaches who beat Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in Foxborough in the playoffs. He's never had the most dynamic quarterback situation, but for the most part, he's done a really good job of keeping the Ravens competitive. Now, under his tutelage, the Ravens have been a very, very good defensive squad. And most importantly, he knows how to coach guys up And as the Broncos have had to find out the hard way over the last few years, coaching is everything. Now, there's a good number of NFL squads who will be after this cat in the next month and a half. You've got Cleveland. They know him very well from the division battles over the years, and Cleveland has a nice young squad over there. Baker Mayfield has a high ceiling, and Cleveland's defense is really talented. John Dorsey has done a very good job of turning the culture around over there in Cleveland. Now, some people say Cleveland's not winning the whole games, but considering where they are this year from where they came from over the last 2 years, Cleveland has come a long way and made a lot of long strides. Now, they still have a long way to go, but Cleveland's done a really good job of kind of starting to turn the tide over in Ohio. You got the New York Jets. Todd Bowles, he's probably gone after this season. They've been mediocre at best during his time over in NYC. They've had flashes of decency, but overall, they've been really disappointing. Tampa Bay, they're over Dirk Koetter. Now, a lot of people say Dallas, but to be honest with you, man, I'm pretty confident in saying Jason Garrett is safe in Dallas, at least for another year. For some reason, I just don't see Jerry Jones just getting rid of Jason Garrett this year. I really don't. So for all you Cowboys fans, I'm sorry. I just don't see it. And I have a lot of friends who are Cowboys fans, and they are hoping to football Jesus that Jerry Jones makes this move, but me personally, I just don't see it. Green Bay, you got to keep your eyes on Green Bay because they've been tossed out there with Mike McCarthy. They've been tossed out there with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers not seeing eye to eye, but I'm not sure about that one either. Now, the Green Bay dropped that game against Seattle Thursday night, but I'm not sure if I really see Green Bay getting rid of Mike McCarthy after this season. Having said that, I think he's got a better chance of getting axed than Jason Garrett, but I'm not really sure that Mike McCarthy gets the axe this year. If he does, though, Green Bay will easily be the most desirable job in the NFL for the simple fact that who's going to turn down a chance to coach Aaron Rodgers? I mean, I don't know. John Harbaugh, it would be for him to turn down a job like that, another team would have to throw a serious amount of bread his way. That would be the only way I would see him not taking that job. Now, out in Arizona, Steve Wilkes could get the axe, even though it's only his first year there. And as bad as Arizona's been, it would be extremely unfair to fire Steve Wilkes after one season. You got to give a coach at least 2 seasons to show some progress. And speaking of a coach in his second season who needs to show some progress, we finally make it to the Denver Broncos. Now, it's well documented on this podcast how I feel about this current coaching staff of the Broncos because I'm ready for a change in Denver. I am 100% ready for a coaching change in Denver. And John Harbaugh would be the perfect change. He's got his coaching feet wet in special teams, and he did a great job coaching those special teams units back in the day. The Broncos are consistently inconsistent at special teams year in and year out. The Broncos are always hot and cold on special teams units. One game they'll do really good. The other game, it's like they didn't get off the plane as far as special teams goes. And then sometimes those two things happen within the same game. So yeah, John Harbaugh could help us from that standpoint. He's smart. He's tough. He knows how to coach dudes up. He coaches to guys' strengths. That's what we're not seeing a whole lot of right now in Denver, despite the fact of Vance Joseph and that staff coming in saying that they were going to coach the guys' strengths and this and that and the other. You're not seeing a whole lot of that in Denver on either side of the ball in any aspect of the game. John Harbaugh beat Tom Brady in his own house. He almost did it again in 2014 when he had Gary Kubiak as his offensive coordinator. Gary Kubiak, he's a great offensive coordinator, and he had Baltimore's offense rolling that year. Gary Kubiak is now a senior advisor for the Broncos, and this is another reason why this move needs to happen. Now, if Denver is serious about being Super Bowl contenders in the next year or two, this is the dude that they need to grab. John Elway prefers veteran head coaches anyway, and he got away from that mentality with Vance Joseph. Now, I'm not saying that only veteran head coaches can get the job done. I'm not saying that at all, because all you got to do is look out at Los Angeles. Look at Sean McVay. Sean McVay is killing it with the Rams right now. He's a first-time head coach. And to be quite honest with you, Sean McVay is probably my favorite head coach in the National Football League right now. Just with the amount of leadership that he shows and just his creativity with the offense, the way he's turned Jared Goff around as a quarterback. People were ready to write him off as a bust. Then in comes Sean McVay, and he's turned that dude's career around. He's changed his life. So, yeah, Sean McVay is what it is at the head coach spot. Kyle Shanahan over in San Francisco, he's doing a decent job over there. Now, despite a rash of injuries to a young squad, Kyle Shanahan he's done a pretty good job with the 49ers. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo got wiped out with the ACL. He's had to play C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins at the quarterback spot lately, and he's had them looking decent. He had C.J. Beathard looking like an all-pro against Green Bay a few weeks back on Monday Night Football, and then Nick Mullins, he had him looking like an all-pro just within the last few weeks. I don't know if you heard, but the story about Nick Mullins, he wasn't even verified on Twitter at the start of that game, and then while the game was going on, Twitter verified his profile. Like, that kind of stuff is crazy. But given all the injuries and the rash of injuries that San Francisco's had to deal with, Kyle Shanahan's done a pretty good job with everything that he's been handed. So, you know, with all that being said, first-time head coaches can come in and be successful. That's not what I'm saying at all. But given how everything has gone with Vance Joseph at the head in Denver, look for John Elway to return to the veteran head coach model to at least, if nothing else, stabilize the franchise. Now, he brought in John Fox after that whole Josh McDaniels disaster. He was another first-time head coach who was a disaster. He brought in John Fox to stabilize the franchise after that. And when he fired John Fox, he brought back Gary Kubiak. So both of these fellas had extensive head coaching experience when they came to Denver, or in Gary Kubiak's case, came back to Denver. Because, you know, Kubiak used to be the offensive coordinator here. He was a backup quarterback to John Elway in his playing days. So, yeah, Gary Kubiak, his roots run deep in Denver, Colorado. So, and then, you know, another thing that I keep saying on this podcast, you know, a lot of people keep saying Denver needs this full-blown rebuild. I even seen a column where, you know, some guy with the Denver Post said that the Broncos should look at trading Von Miller, which is completely, I don't even understand that line of thinking, but whatever. Denver has got talent in place, and I said this on the last podcast. Denver has lost every game this year by a touchdown or less, except the Jets game when they didn't even get off the plane. And when you look at how Denver lost the other 5 games outside of the Jets game, Denver was competitive, even against both games against Kansas City, even in the game against the Rams. I mean, 2 of the best teams in the league. Denver lost both of those games by a touchdown or less. Denver has talent on the roster. We just don't have the coaches that know how to bring it all together to actually turn this talent into something where it's consistently churning out these wins. But Denver has a decent roster that, with a few changes, is ready to win sooner rather than later. Now, I don't know if this move will actually happen, so I'm not going to get my hopes up about it, but I am definitely with it. Moving on with the lowest road, Jordy Nelson reportedly was considering retiring from the NFL this week, and if he does indeed go through with it at some point, he will become the latest Raider to depart from this disaster of a team. Jordy Nelson was injured in the game against the Chargers this past Sunday. Now, the analyst that originally reported this, Chris Reed of Silver and Black Today, he's kind of starting to backtrack on that. He said it was purely speculation on his part. But even with all that, it is something that warrants looking into. But, you know, first of all, the Raiders are trash. You know, I'm sorry. And this is not the Broncos fan in me talking. This is somebody from the outside looking in. The Oakland Raiders are terrible this year. You know, one of the saddest things about this entire deal in Oakland is you have guys like Marshawn Lynch, who was perfectly retired. He was happily retired, comes back to play for his hometown squad, and then this happens. Then you have a guy like Jordy Nelson, who was revered in Green Bay, was one of the best receivers that's ever come through that franchise. And Oakland was the first and only team that he visited during his free agency tour after Green Bay cut him. And the Raiders, they recruited this dude hard. And personally, I thought Green Bay should have done a little bit more to try to keep Nelson around, maybe offer him a pay cut, restructure his deal, something like that, because he was so productive in his 9 seasons with the squad. So I was shocked when they cut him. And on top of that, he was Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy for all 9 seasons that he was there. In Green Bay, He had 550 catches, over 7,800 yards, 69 touchdowns, and then he comes over here to the Raiders. Now he's only got 25 passes for 353 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's a shame that his career has come to a stop like this, basically. Like I said, the Raiders are struggling. So, I haven't been with this John Gruden hiring from the jump. I said from the jump, this hire was a bad idea. Because, yes, he won a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, but come on, man. Let's be completely honest. That was Tony Dungy's guys that he won that championship with. Because, basically, the cake was already mixed. It was placed in the oven. And then, the original cook of the cake was fired. He was kicked out of the kitchen. Then John Gruden comes in. All he did was take the cake out of the oven, let it rest a little bit, cut it up, put it on a plate, and put some ice cream next to it. That's really all he did. The Raiders had some decent pieces in place, and then this dude comes in and just demolishes the entire thing, which was completely unneeded and unnecessary. He traded Khalil Mack. He traded Amari Cooper. Bruce Irvin, the Raiders are so bad, he asked for his release. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, he hung up his cleats. And now John Gruden, he's gone out of his way to be overly critical of Derek Carr. And by the way, while I'm talking about Derek Carr, I honestly do not see Derek Carr being back in Oakland come 2019 because Derek Carr is frustrated. I watched the presser with him after the game on Sunday. He's normally very optimistic, even when things are just going downright terrible. He's normally optimistic, normally upbeat, and this dude just looks like his spirit has been broken as far as the Raiders go. So, personally, I don't – and then on top of that, when you consider Derek Carr's salary, John Gruden already showed that he's willing to get rid of guys who have huge salaries on the Raiders' books. When you consider Derek Carr's salary – his production on the field, which has been really up and down, inconsistent. And then on top of that, him and John Gruden, they're not seeing eye to eye. They're really not getting along. When you consider all of that, it's hard for me to see Derek Carr back in Oakland come 2019. On top of that, it's hard to see the team itself back in Oakland in 2019 because they don't even know where they're going to be playing next year. But that, more on that a little bit later. John Gruden is stuck on this deal about stockpiling picks. And, but the thing about that is there's no guarantee that these picks are going to work out because the NFL draft is nothing more than a big glorified crapshoot. That's really all it is because you study this guy, you run him through all these tests, you run him through all these drills, you watch all these pieces of film on him. And then after all of that, you hope on top of hope that this dude works out. John Gruden is a grinding, hard-nosed, in-your-face type of coach who has a very old-school style of coaching, and it takes a certain kind of player, a certain kind of man to be able to take that kind of coaching, accept it, and respond to it accordingly. Now, he's been away from the game for 10 years, and then all of a sudden, the Raiders thought that he was going to be away for the game for 10 years and then come in and pick up right where he left off. And then on top of that, he feels super secure in the fact that he's got this thing sewed up for the next 10 years. Then on top of that, he's got that chump change contract that's only worth $100 million guaranteed. I mean, me, you, and the rest of us, we got that in our back pocket. So, that ain't no thing. Now, first of all, covering the game from a broadcast booth or a studio is a whole lot different than having to coach guys up, draw up game plans, and break down different opponents week in and week out. It's completely different. Two different things. And calling games is hard, man. I tried that last year. I remember I wanted to be a play-by-play commentator, and calling games is hard. That is no joke. There is a reason why the Jim Nances of the world, the Joe Bucks of the world, the Al Michaels of the world, or the Mike Tiricos, there is a reason why these cats are as highly respected and as highly regarded and as highly paid as they are. Because to get to that level, being a commentator, it is hard, man. So respect to anybody that can do it. So I'm not taking that away from John Gruden or anybody that is a commentator. All I'm saying is that's a completely different deal than having to coach these guys day in and day out. And if you step away from anything for 10 years, it's going to take you a while for you to get your groove back, if you get it back, and if you had one to begin with, especially in a skilled profession like being a coach. And at this level, the NFL level, that's a tall task. And then on top of that, when you mix in a guy whose players, they're simply not feeling him, it's going to be a long season in Oaktown, man. In all honesty, as a Broncos fan, I've done my fair share of talking trash about the Raiders and talking trash about their fans. That's to be expected. But to be honest with you, man, the fans in Oakland, they deserve so much better than this, because the fans in Oakland, man, they're loyal, they're passionate, they're hardcore. These people show up to the games consistently, dressed up in the costumes, the Raiders gear, makeup on, the whole nine. Raiders fans go out. You have fans that do that for every team, but this is a team that has been bad for the better part of the last 20 years, and their fans consistently show up and show out. So they deserve better than this dumpster fire that they're getting right now. Then on top of that, you consider the Golden State Warriors. They're leaving Oakland to go to San Francisco, which is another huge slap to the face of the city and the fans. So now you got both the Raiders and the Warriors leaving, and the city and the fans, they're just left with nothing when it comes to sports. But at least for the Warriors, the owner, Joe Lacob, he's at least paying for their new stadium out of his own pocket. I respect that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that a team shouldn't have the option to leave a city. Of course, these are private businesses, so of course they have that option. But when you leave a city just because the city and its residents don't want to help you don't want to help you pay for a stadium that you can clearly self-finance, you deserve the vitriol and the hatred that you're more than likely going to get. So, if a team wants to pack up and leave for greener pastures just because, and they're going to pay for their own facility, by all means, I still don't like it, but I respect it. And that's, that they have every right to do that if that's what you're going to do. But don't sit here and try to tell citizens of a city that, hey, we want a new stadium and we want you to help pay for it. And if you don't help us pay for this stadium that we can clearly self-finance because we make, X amount of billions of dollars a year, then we're just going to up and leave. Because at that point, bye. And then on top of that, I'm normally not with fans leaving teams. I'm normally the guy that says, hey, be loyal to your team through thick and thin, this and that and the other. You stick with your team because it's the bad times that make the good times so fun and yada, yada, yada. I'm normally that dude. But this, when a team leaves the city, it's free game. And in the Raiders case, you left twice. And on top of that, not only have you left twice, but you're trash while you're leaving. Bye. Bye. Or as the sisters like to say, boy, bye. So, Mark Davis, team management, executives, John Gruden, all these cats should be straight up ashamed of themselves for what they've dragged this team down to, because the Raiders were a decent squad just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 2016, the Raiders were 12-4, tied with Kansas City for the division lead. Then they ended up placing second in the division to the Chiefs. And now here we are, 2018, 2 years later, and the Raiders are bottom feeders. They've won one game the entire season. This squad is bad. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think the exodus is over. I honestly think there's going to be a mass exodus out of Oakland at the end of the season. And if I'm one of the Raiders, hey, man, look, get out while you can, fellas. Get out, because this thing is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. All right, it's time to switch gears. Let's move on to I'm in and I'm out. Let's see what I'm in and out on today. Amarillo Professional Baseball announced the name of the new minor league baseball team and logo this past Tuesday. The new baseball team will be named the Amarillo Sod Poodles. Yes, you heard me right, the Amarillo Sod Poodles. Their nickname will be the Soddies. They're the AA affiliate of the San Diego Padres. Now, I'm all in on my hometown having a professional baseball squad again. I really am, because I love baseball. The sport is fun. It's a sport of strategy. It's a sport of, in a lot of ways, it's a sport of finesse. It's a sport of physicality. But man, it's like a chess match. It's like a cat and mouse type of game. So, from that aspect, I love baseball. But I am out on this name. This name is going to take some getting used to. Even though I'm not feeling this name, I'm not complaining, because it's cool to see future major leaguers in person. And the games are so cheap and the quality of the sport is not bad. So from that point, I like it. Now when I lived in Midland, Texas, I used to go to Rockhounds games all the time because that was one of my stomping grounds too. Rockhounds games were fun. And, Of course, they're the minor league affiliate of the Oakland A's. So it was always cool to see guys that potentially could be called up at any given time. And you might cut on the TV, and watch a major league game. You're like, hey, man, I just watched that dude out here in Midland just a few weeks ago. So that part of it was always pretty cool. And that's what I like about minor league games is you see guys who are fighting their way into the majors. So it's not like you go out here and you just see some trash baseball team, just doing it just for, just because. No, these are guys who are actually fighting for a roster spot at the movies. They're fighting for a roster spot at the highest level of the sport. So that part of it is cool. These games are cheap as well. So if you're looking for a cheap date or just something to do when you want to get out of the house but you don't have a lot of money, balling on a budget, if you're looking for something like that, these are the perfect venues to go to. But this name, man, this name is going to take some getting used to because a sod poodle, a sod poodle. So you're probably asking, like, what exactly is a sod poodle? Well, it's a nickname for a prairie dog of all things. And prairie dogs, they're all over that part of Texas, man. I remember as kids, we used to try to chase those things around, man. Prairie dogs, they're some cool little animals, but they some pesky little things, man. They can do a number on your yard. Now, while the name is funky and definitely different, this is normal for minor league baseball squads because you got teams like the Lincoln Salt Dogs up in Nebraska, the Midland Rockhounds over in West Texas, the Texas Air Hogs over here in Grand Prairie, the Wichita Wingnuts in Wichita, Kansas, the Montgomery Biscuits in Alabama, and the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp over in Florida, just to name a few. Now, those are just some of the crazy names that adorn minor league baseball squads across the entire country. So it definitely fits that kind of branding. So if that's what they were looking for, they definitely got it. Now, personally, I was hoping for the name the Amarillo Bombers just because one of Amarillo's nicknames is Bomb City. Now, somebody on Twitter suggested the name the Amarillo Armadillos, which would have been cool from a namesake standpoint. But Amarillo already had the Amarillo Dillas back in the early 90s and the early 2000s, so that really wasn't going to fly most likely. Now, they had a Name the Team sweepstakes back in May where they picked from Sod Poodles, Bronc Busters, Jerky, Long Haulers, and Boot Scooters. I'm not really sure how I feel about any of those names either. But out of all those names, I probably would have went with either Jerky or Boot Scooters. Just because, yeah. These names, boy, they're a trip. The team's inaugural home opener will be Monday, April 8th, 2019, against the Midland Rockhounds. So I might actually have to make a trip home for that. That would actually be pretty cool to go see and see that new stadium open up. So I'm gonna keep my eyes open for that. Dez Bryant tore his ACL in practice last Friday, one day after making his signing with the Saints official. Now, with this injury, Dez more than likely won't be the hot commodity come free agent time that he possibly would have been before he got hurt. Now, I'm out on this, of course, because I was really looking forward to seeing Dez make this work for the Saints. I was pulling for Dez to make this work for the Saints, mostly because I was interested to see how he would look after everything happened. He got a raw deal from Dallas in the fact that the timeline that they released him, they knew they were going to get rid of him. And they should have just went ahead and did it right after the season, not a few weeks before the draft when teams pretty much already had their boards set and they already kind of knew where they were going to go come draft day. And for that reason, I was looking forward to seeing him play against the Cowboys on the 29th of this month because it's always fun to see how players play against their former teams. This right here in New Orleans was the perfect setup for Dez Bryant because he joins what is the best team in the NFL right now. In my opinion, he would have been the number 2 guy, which would have gave him a chance to prove himself to the rest of the league, and it would have gave him a chance to show that he wasn't finished. Now, the bad thing is for Dez that he's 30 years old. His body has betrayed him the last few years with injuries and wear and tear, and that's all part of the game. We get that. But, Father Time has no mercy and takes no mercy on anybody. Now we'll just have to wait and see what happens with Dez next year. Now, he's already came out and said that he's going to re-sign with New Orleans next season, so we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, I really hate this for Dez, and I wish him all the best. Larry Fitzgerald passed Terrell Owens for second on the NFL's all-time receiving yards list with a 15-yard catch late in the fourth quarter Sunday against the Chiefs. Larry Fitz now has 15,952 yards and counting over the last 15 years. Only Jerry Rice is in front of him with 22,895 yards. I'm all in on this because I love Larry Fitzgerald as a person and as a football player. He is truly one of the great guys in the NFL. Now, I just hate the fact that he spent such a great Hall of Fame career with the trash squad like the Cardinals. But now the Cardinals, they were a really good squad when they went to the Super Bowl back in 2008. Well, of course, you got to be a good squad to get to the Super Bowl. And I hated to see them lose that game because I was pulling for the Cardinals mainly because of Larry Fitzgerald and Kurt Warner. When I saw Santonio Holmes make that catch in the back of the end zone, oh man, I ain't gonna lie, that kind of took a little bit of air out of me because I was really pulling for them to pull that off just specifically for Larry Fitz and Kurt Warner. Now, the Cardinals, they've been to the playoffs in 2008, 2014, and 2015, but the other 12 seasons in his career, they've struggled. Bad quarterbacks, bad coaches, bad general managers, and through it all, Larry Fitz has stayed loyal to the Cardinals. Now, the NFL, man, the NFL doesn't deserve a guy like Larry Fitz. I'm just going to be honest. The NFL just does not deserve Larry Fitzgerald. I really wish he would have been able to win a Super Bowl because he truly, truly, truly deserves a championship on his resume. Cardinals fans and NFL fans as a whole, enjoy this dude enjoy this dude while he's playing. Because guys like Larry Fitzgerald do not come around very often. So a big congratulations to Larry Fitzgerald on his career milestone. All right, it's time to move on to my favorite segment of this podcast. This is some bull jive. One of the biggest stories in the NBA right now, not having to do anything with LeBron James or the Lakers, involves Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and the drama between them, and as a result, the drama in the Golden State locker room. Kevin Durant got upset with Draymond for not passing him the ball as the game against the Clippers went into OT Monday night. The two got into a feud, and Draymond allegedly called Durant a B-word multiple times and reportedly brought up his pending free agency status. Now, first of all, I'm not going to lie. I kind of like this. And not for the reason that you're thinking. I'm not with all the drama and everything else, but the only reason why this one kind of caught my eye, because originally I wasn't even going to talk about this, but the only reason why I even halfway support this is because Golden State has become the most boring story and boring team in the NBA. Because everybody already knows what's going to happen. I mean, there's not a team in the NBA right now that can really beat these dudes at full strength. Even though Steph Curry is out with a groin injury right now, there's not a person in the NBA or who covers the NBA who thinks his short-term absence is really going to hurt this team one bit. They still have KD, Klay, Draymond. Boogie Cousins hadn't even played yet, and this squad only has 4 losses. They're 12-4 right now. So this little bit of drama surrounding them, well, it's good content for the simple fact that it adds a little bit of spice to an otherwise boring squad and boring story. I'm sorry, they're just boring. Now, of course, though, Golden State went on to suspend Draymond for Tuesday's game against the Hawks, and Draymond is known to be a fiery, emotional dude. He constantly toes the line, and when you have a guy who constantly toes the line, there are times where he'll occasionally cross it, and when he crosses it, you gotta let him know the deal. But the constant towing of the line, that's part of what makes Draymond such a great defender. That's part of what lights his fire, because he's the guy that he sets the tone for Golden State's defense. They're simply not the same team defensively if he's not in there. They're just not. Now, he's not the most important part of their squad. That's, of course, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant without a doubt. But Draymond is definitely one of the heartbeats, if not the heartbeat, of Golden State. I wasn't as surprised as some people were when all this happened because fights between teammates, they happen all the time in sports. We just don't hear about it a lot. Every team I've ever played on and every sport I've ever played on had fighting between teammates. I mean, it just happens because you got the competitive nature. You got dudes who want to be the best. guys who want to win. You got all this testosterone in one place. You mix all that in together. Guys are going to bump heads. I mean, it's just going to happen. Tempers are going to flare from time to time. It happens. Things happen. You move on. And to Golden State's credit, they've done a really good job of meeting this situation head on and being honest about it instead of letting it fester and turn into frustration. Because when it turns into frustration, then you got a bigger problem on your hands. But Draymond bringing up KD's upcoming free agency, that's that bull jive. This is the thing, man. Stop worrying about what another grown man is going to do with his life and his career and handle business in the present. Because even the Bible says, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring troubles of its own. Matthew 6:34. Worry about this season and winning another championship, and the rest of that stuff will work itself out. Because at the end of the day, Kevin Durant's going to do what Kevin Durant wants to do. Personally, I think Kevin Durant was going to walk either way, even without this fight. Kevin Durant's probably going to walk. He's probably not going to be in Golden State next year. But whatever he does, Kevin Durant is a grown man, and he's free to do whatever he wants to do. Now, personally, I'll be honest with you. I hope he leaves Golden State for the simple fact that it will shake up the NBA a little bit, and it'll make the finals a little more fun to watch. So please, KD, do us all a favor and get up out of Golden State. Maybe Draymond is looking at it like, bruh, you're not even committed to us for the long term. You're just in this for yourself, so don't even step to me like that. And I get that. But at the same time, this is how professional sports work. Draymond knew the deal when he signed his paperwork and went through all the drills, all the tests to get drafted into the NBA. So he already knew this is how the league works. On top of the fact, he played the biggest part in getting Kevin Durant to come to Golden State when he went out to the parking lot after LeBron James and the Cavs put their foot in him, came back from being down 3-1, and won that series back in 2016. He went out to his car in the parking lot and was crying for KD to come over in Golden State. Hey, man, we need you. We need you. We can use your talent, this and that, and the other. So don't sit up here and act brand new with Kevin Durant and his free agency. Don't pay attention to another man's pockets and another man's paycheck. That really gets me, man. Like, just mind your own business. Oh, man, as a grown man, I couldn't care less what another grown man does with his pockets, his paycheck, or his family, as long as he's not hurting me. Whatever you do in your house with your money, that's on you. Just don't bring it over here. So, some people think this could potentially kill their locker room. I personally don't think it will, but it is something that definitely has the potential to if they don't handle it the right way. Well, whatever happens, Draymond Green, that free agency stuff, that's some bull jive. Well, that's my time for episode 31 of the Undrafted podcast. I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for blessing me with the gifts, the talents, the resources to be able to do this podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in. I want to leave you with the Bible verse here, Romans 8:18. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Keep pushing in whatever you're doing. And remember, do your best and let God handle the rest. Be blessed.